Does anybody see it starting yet?
Yeah.
Okay,
Started.
let me know. All right. So this is the Sunday afternoon call in Thailand. It's designed for the people in UK, but and the Europe. But right now, there's nobody in Europe on the call.
Amit, where's Amit?
No, Ahmed is in India right now.
It's
I see.
definitely Christmas time. I mean,
I'm
family,
traveling in
everyone's.
India.
Oh,
Okay, cool.
It's
So we've
vacation time
got
in Europe.
1 in India and 3 in Thailand in the moment. And that, Kat, you were talking about language, especially with Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. Can you repeat what you were saying?
yes. I was listening to something from Christopher Titmus. I think he was talking about his stories at Watsu and Mok and his life in general. And he was he was saying that Thai people used to get really offended and really start a lot of controversy because when they would go to the Watsu and Mok, Bhikkhu Buddhadasa would point to the dogs and he would say long pole, like father of the Dhamma, or like he would give them high Dhamma, look at the dog or something like that, or he would say I don't know Thai words. I think the word you mentioned, the abbot word, what was it?
Chow Wat is the word in Thai for the abbot of a Wat, the formal
something
word.
like that. And it would really piss the Thai people off. And I thought that was kind of funny in general anyway.
He would actually use a lot of language that would upset some people. And let's first straighten out about the word long. Long actually means uncle.
Yeah,
But long
father.
po, no, uncle.
I thought long po was father. If you say long po,
Well,
father.
the word long is the word for uncle, but long po elevates the status of it.
Oh, okay.
Like it's your uncle who lives across the street. You would call him long, but a long po is an honorary that, in fact, it's most, let us say, traditionally used for Chao Kun. A Chao Kun is a very high status monk, being someone who runs a wat or a temple that's very, very large, that in fact there are about 300 to 500 Chao Kuns in Thailand, and they would all be then referenced as Luang Po, but other monks of high status would also be referenced at Luang Po. The story that I have about that is that when I was in Washington, D.C., I stayed there for months. And then I came back to Thailand, and Achan Po asked me who was the Chow Wat, and I said it was Luang Po. And he was half joking and half pissed off that I didn't know the name, that the actual name of the monk was Suralak. But I only knew because the only thing that anybody ever called him was Luang Po. And then many, many years later, I think this was in like 1986 or so, and then I was there years later, and he was still alive, and he was in his 90s. But another monk had taken over all the duties. He sort of lived in a little room behind in the boat. And that's where he stayed, and a lot of people didn't know him anymore. He was very, very old by then, but always known as Luang Po. So I was also at Fremont in California when Achan Prasert was actually designated as a Chao Kun. And that's when people started calling him Luang Po. And I never found out what his actually new name was. Is when someone becomes a Chao Kun, they actually get a new name. Another story about that is and by the way, the Chao Kun, as I said, is designated by the king, but really what it is that it's done by the Bureau of Religious Affairs. It's done by all the monks, but then the title is given out by the king in a ceremony or something. So Ajahn Pasert went to Thailand to get his new name. And when he came back, everybody called him Luang Po, and I never found out what his new name was when he was
Who is
designated.
Ajahn Pasert?
Huh?
Who is Ajahn Pasert?
Ajahn Pasert was the Chow Wat, the head monk at Wat Fremantle, California,
Ah, I see. Okay.
when I was staying there. That's actually quite a large Wat. It's one of the bigger ones in San Francisco. That when I was in San Francisco, I actually visited about 7 different Wats. But I think that I counted one of them as the Berkeley Zen Center, because actually the Berkeley Zen Center is actually quite right next door to a Thai Wat. And so, but the one in Fremont is a big one. There was about 20 monks there. There was also a Western monk who was there. I kind of took him under my wing, and he was a student of mine for quite a long time. So that name then means something, but it actually kind of means granduncle or grandfather or a really important kind of person. And it's always used like that. Do you know someone, Kath, that's named Luang Po?
Well, that's what people would call Ajahn Maitri. Some people would call him Luang Po, Luang
They would
Po.
call him Luang Po. So that may be an honorific that they give him, or because of his age, or it might be because he's a Chao Kun. You can ask him. Is he
Well, I
Chao?
did ask what. Well, I asked what Luang Po
What it
meant,
meant, rather
and he said
than
father, not. Well, maybe
uh-huh.
he's a grandfather. I could be just mistaken in my memory, but something like that, yeah.
No. In Thailand, uncle and father are very close together. They're almost synonymous. Just like Tam's nephew, she calls son, and I call him my stepson, but he's actually Tam's nephew. So in the West, these words are designated as to have a particular meaning in lineage, and in Thailand, it has to do more with respect rather than specific gene combinations.
Yeah.
All right. So here's another point about Achan Bhikkhu Buddhadasa is that they designated him as a Chao Kun, and he refused.
Oh, that's
He refused. He
he
would
wants to
not.
spice things up.
Pardon?
He wants to spice things up. Wants to get
Well,
some
he just
controversy
wasn't
going.
into all of the honorifics and all of that kind of stuff. It was quite an honor that, in fact, now both Achan Semedo and Achan Amaro, and I think just recently Achan Pisano, all three are Westerners, are now called Chao Kun on their own website, which assumes that, in fact, there are now Western monks who are Chao Kun because they're called Luang Po.
Well, wouldn't Ajahn Sumedho be like the first Western generation that would be have that title?
Yeah, he deserves that. I wouldn't be unsurprised. It would be very interesting or very typical, in fact, for the Royal Council to designate him that way. He's old enough. He's been a monk long enough. He was almost a monk 10 years when I was there as a layman before I met him. Actually, I think that I was already ordained. And it was because of Achan Sumedho he invited me to Amaravati, which I eventually went to stay for a while. So yeah, he's fully deserving. And that Achan Amaro and Achan Pasanto, in fact, I think that when I was at Amaravati in like 1986, 87, sometime around that time, Ajahn Pasano had already been a monk for many years. I think he would have been a monk by 20 years by that time, or at least he was senior. So Ajahn Pasano had been around. In fact, he was the abbot of what Pananachat for many years, back in the bad old days. He was it. He was he ran that place like an army sergeant. And so that's
Yeah,
the
they're quite
history of it.
strict.
So, getting into your question about Bhikkhu Buddhadasa and other monks using low-class language, like calling a dog Luang Po, you can see because of the title that I'm using and the respect for it, why he would actually upset some Thai people. They didn't like it that he was calling a dog Luang Po. Those dogs don't even live 20 years. But also, there were a couple of dogs, but one of them in particular became quite famous as he would hang around Achan Po. Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. In fact, I do have somewhere in all the archives of photos someplace, I've got a photo that I sent out to some of my friends here on Skype saying, count the dogs. It was actually a photo of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, but if you look and count, you'd find that there were two laying under his chair and another one close by. And so he attracted dogs. He also attracted chickens. There's a lot of photos of him, one in particular of a chicken sitting on his lap while he's talking. He's giving a talk, and the chicken crawled up on his lap and sat there, and he just continued his conversation while the chicken was sitting on his lap. So it's also well known, in fact, I learned this from Santikaro, that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa would use really low-class language. And one of the low-class words that he would use was the word gu. Now, in Thai, the reference for a person would be kun, or talking to about oneself, it would be chan or pom. Now, they don't normally use those pronouns if it will do without, but if you have to be very specific, then they're talking about me or you. But Achan Bhikkhu Buddhadasa would use the word gu, which is a low class word, and he would upset people. Okay, and he was talking about actually anatta, selfishness, and he would use a very low class word for that. But he would also use not necessarily sexual language, but he would use potty language, toilet language, piece of crap, that kind of stuff, which for a lot of people, they would not like a high-class monk using such low-class street language.
Oh, hits shit with a stick. That's what
I'm
I
sorry, what was
remember.
that, Daniel?
Hitting shit with a stick.
Yeah, hitting shit with, exactly. That's one of the phrases that he would use.
Yeah.
And so,
With a
sorry,
short stick.
but that's my lineage, and I pick up on that, and so I tend to use low-class words. Now, in English, there actually, I would say that low-class language in America actually has legal connotations, or at least, like in Hollywood, they would have the 7 bad words that you're never supposed to use on television. But now that we have the cable TV, people tend to use those words, but you'll hear them on YouTube and the internet because people don't care. But in the old days, Christianity had it marked that you can't reference things with low-class sexual language or low-class potty language. You couldn't use those words, like shit and fuck and bitch and son of a bitch and all of those kind of things. That in fact, I didn't understand it when I was a child. That that I learned that what a bitch was a female dog, and so a son of a bitch is a puppy, and that's all gushy and everything. I really like dogs, but it kind of took me aback when somebody was called a son of a bitch and they didn't like it. And I said, "Well, he's calling you a puppy," and they don't like the word "son of a bitch." All right, but I don't think that Achan Bhikkhu Buddhadasa would call somebody a dog, but instead he would elevate the dog above the people, and that would be a kind of a no-no. Calling that dog Luang Po, that's that's over the hill. That's beyond the pale, and so I could appreciate why people would not like it. But here's the point now, and that is look at the way that we attach to words and give them meaning, and other people don't have the same meaning or the same attachment to words. That in fact, one of the reasons that I use low class language is to make a point. All right? Like, for instance, perception. That I'll say, you made that stuff up, and it doesn't quite hit them the way that we could say is that perception is you made that shit up. That's what perception really is that we make our own images, we make our own concepts, we live in a conceptualized world, but when you call it, you made that shit up, it impacts people. That's the part of the reason why Achan Bhikkhu Buddhadasa or Tanachan would use low-class language like that, is because if you use high-class, highfalutin philosophical language, it just doesn't hit people in the gut the way that low-class language does.
Western Buddhism loves highfalutin, high-class language.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
That, in fact, Buddhism is in the West, it's more like a philosophy rather than down and dirty. That, in fact, the Catherine and I were just talking about that, where the monks over at the Wat that he's at, they don't talk about the Dhamma, but they live the Dhamma. That the Dhamma is actually for the living. It's down in the dirt. It's not high in the sky the way that philosophy and Christian beliefs and all of that airy-fairy stuff. But when we hear it in that regard, it doesn't impact us. And so the other joke that just came around is that Anna and I were having a conversation where she was saying that she was her father was French and her mother was African. I might have that backwards. But in France, she's not seen as French, she's seen as African. But in Africa, she's not seen as African, she's seen as French. So in fact, she's not both African and French. In the perception of people, she's neither one. There she's not French, and there she's not African. She's not anything. And the reason that happens is because of people's perception. And when I told that to Kat, I added the point, fuck perception. Just fuck perception. The same way that Elon Musk says, fuck Disney. Which really means I don't care. That what we need to do is get beyond perception and see things more directly rather than making shit up. And so this is how we can understand that language actually has value when it is used low class. So if people get upset because Bhikkhu Buddhadasa calls a dog Luang Po, what that means is that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa has a great deal of respect for that dog. That he loves the dog. The dog loves Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. That dog would follow him around everywhere. In fact, at Wat Suan Mok, in one of the buildings that was built after he died, there is a full-blown statue of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. And guess what is on with that statue? Is that dog. That dog is on that statue, life-size dog standing or sitting right beside Bhikkhu Buddhadasa standing. And so he would call that dog Luang Po, and I assumed that he was doing that intentionally to upset Thai people.
I think you did a
Because they
lot
were,
of that.
huh?
I think you've done a lot of that kind of intentional stuff.
Yes, he would
Make a point.
intentionally try to surprise people to put them off. That in fact, I remember one time it really, there were several things that really impacted me. I haven't told you about this one, but the first time that I was ever with Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was in a Dhamma talk. The first time that he saw me and I really saw him, he was giving a Dhamma talk, and there I was bound and determined that I was going to sit in that full lotus posture for the full talk, an hour or so talk. And I sat there, and then when they left, I continued to sit there. And I think that I made an impression on Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, because a couple of months later, he teased me about it. He says, I bet your legs really hurt. And yet he did respect the sitting in the lotus posture. And the reason for it is because it's a very stable posture. But a lot of Thai people can sit in it because they've been sitting in that stable lotus posture for many, many years, their whole lives. In fact, I've got a stepdaughter. The first time that I met her, I saw that she was eating her food, sitting in the full lotus posture. Right now, she's living downstairs. I haven't seen her recently, but at least as early as last year, I saw her when she was sitting and eating, still sitting in the full lotus posture, because she could. I can't sit in the full lotus posture anymore. I'm an old man now. I've had a broken leg and all kinds of stuff since then. And so, but I can get into it. I can get into the lotus posture. I can sit there for a while, but then it's a strain, and I don't see any reason to continue to stay there. And so I don't recommend anybody training that, because, in fact, in the Anapanasati Sutta, it has the whole quality of being comfortable and to relax the body. Very few Westerners can do the lotus posture and relax into it.
I mean, in the sutta, it just says sit cross-legged, and
now you're getting one of my stories up. Go ahead, I'm listening.
No, I just mean in the sutta, it just says sit under a tree and then sit cross-legged, but it doesn't really mention like any specific way of being cross-legged. Does it mean lotus or like the Burmese sitting?
Precisely so. All right. Now, here's an interesting point. Have you actually looked up that Pali word for the cross-legged position?
No.
That's actually a bad translation. That what it does translate to specifically is a sitting place, not a sitting position. And that it can, in fact, mean any piece of furniture. It could mean a couch. It could mean a chair. It's a sitting place. And somebody, Westerner, probably back in the days when they didn't really understand, or maybe they asked some Thai person, and the Thai person was pointing at, sitting on the floor or sitting on a mat or whatever like that in the cross-legged position. And this Westerner, without really understanding, he starts translating that part of the passage. That's actually in the Anapanasati Sutta, of sitting cross-legged in English does not mean that. It means sitting in a sitting place, sitting in a chair, sitting on a couch. In fact, the word couch was part of the translation in the dictionary. I invite you to get a Pali dictionary and look it up. So a lot of the words that we use are actually because, remember, English and Western Buddhism is highfalutin. They want to go that extra mile, which actually takes us out of the middle path into austerity. And the Buddha did not allow many austerities. One of the few austerities that the Buddha allowed was walking barefoot, going on tudong, going out and about, going barefoot. Well, that's the way that humans have done historically. I wonder when shoes were invented. The dogs don't wear shoes. Chimpanzees don't wear shoes. A lot of Indians, I met, you're in India, a lot of Indians, they don't wear shoes. They haven't worn shoes their whole lives.
I've never seen Thai monks. Only foreign people do not wear shoes. I've never seen Thai people not wear sandals or slippers. Only foreign monks or foreign people in general will walk around. They're actually barefooted. I've never seen Thai people do it. You know, I've never seen.
Well, I'm one of them. I mean, I've done that for so many years. I actually have jokes about it, that I've gone barefoot for a long time. I learned to do. In fact, do the Thai monks go on bendabat with sandals?
Oh,
Because
sorry. Yes, sorry. Only on Bindabat, but any other time.
any other time they're wearing shoes, but on bendabat they go barefoot.
Yeah, only on
Right?
Bindabat.
Right? Because that was the tradition. So there are other austerities, but twisting the body into yogic postures like the lotus posture was not part of the teaching of the Buddha. That was something that the Indians were doing in the neighborhood.
Hmm.
The question is, can you sit upright? Can you sit straight? Can you sit stably? Can you sit for a while comfortably?
Ah, I've been wanting to ask a question about this for a long time. So I better ask it now before I forget it again. And that is, during the sitting, I noticed that I will start slowly like changing my posture. Um, how should we handle this? Should we keep our sati on our bodily posture and make sure our back doesn't slouch, or should we just correct it whenever we see our posture has changed a lot and we're not upright anymore? How should we go about this?
Well, all right. Let's look at it from several positions. One of them is that the Buddha does talk about sitting upright. And the reason that people would practice sitting upright, like right now, I'm sitting upright. I don't sit back on the chair, but I sit upright. And that practice actually has to do with the prevention of backache. That when you slump, either sideways or back or over like this, it creates a backache. The reason for that is because of gravity. If you're sitting up straight, gravity is pulling you straight down. But if you're leaning to one side or forward or back like this, especially the forward of leaning over, because you see a lot of photos of monks slumped over, that slumping is actually painful because it pulls, the gravity pulls on the strain and puts the strain on the back. It's better to sit up. It's actually more comfortable to sit up. So the next thing would be, it's also comfortable to not sit in a posture, even if you're sitting on the floor cross-legged, don't sit in a posture that hurts or causes a strain. But there's one posture that is very common in Thailand that I never was able to get into it, and that is that when you're sitting kind of on, let us say, on the left foot, and the right foot is tucked in and the left foot is tucked in, and you're sitting there. And when I would do that, oh, it would hurt the side. I never could sit up straight. And so I never was able to master that particular posture. And yet I would go to any Wat. You see 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 Thai women sitting in that posture. It's comfortable
Yeah.
for them. Another posture would be what you call stooping, which means that you're standing up, but your knees are completely bent and your butt is only about 2 or 3 inches from the floor. And for some people, they can actually sit the butt all the way to the floor, and yet they're sitting or they're standing on their feet, but their legs are, the knees are bent. It's called the squatting position, really squatting. I can't do that.
Position?
Pardon?
Okay. Well, they meditate in that position.
No, but they'll rebuild motors
Ah,
and they'll operate sewing machines and they'll boil aluminum until it melts, and all kinds of industries where they don't have chairs, but they don't sit on the floor or on the butt because the floor is so dirty that they don't dirty their clothing, but they'll get right down by standing on their feet, but their knees are bent so much so that their butt is only an inch or two from the floor. All right, that's a typically Asian posture. I have never seen a Westerner master some of these postures. The only posture that I ever quasi-mastered was the lotus posture, as well as the half lotus and the Burmese and those kind of postures. Never got real postures that the Asians can do. But we don't need those things. There's no reason to torment yourself. And that was the point that you were making, Daniel, is that when the body begins to hurt, do you sit there and let it hurt? The answer to that is that hurting is actually a word that means that you're uncomfortable. It means that you're dissatisfied. You don't like it. That's dukkha. To sit in a posture that is painful and uncomfortable and you can't do it, there's no reason to train yourself into that posture so that you can be comfortable, because you may never be comfortable ever in that posture. Why try?
Oh, it's not that I get uncomfortable, but the thing is, okay, I sit upright and then 2 minutes later I start slouching a little bit, but it's not hurting. But my question is, should we correct our posture to sit upright again?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
Of course. That in fact, the easy way to do it is imagine that you're a balloon and you breathe in, and as you breathe in, your posture straightens up. And as you breathe out, your posture, you slump straight down. And so the way of looking at it is you breathe in, and as you breathe out. Notice the difference, okay? As you breathe in, you go up. And then as you breathe out, you go down. As you breathe up, in, you raise your height. You see that with my shoulders. When I'm breathing in, the shoulders will go up. When I breathe out, the shoulders go down just a little bit. All right? The question is not, can you sit still? The question is, can you be mindful while sitting?
Or one technique, I guess, is the monk here gave me a bottle of water and put it on my head and said, if I'm gonna sit, if I'm gonna sit, go to my kuti, I should be putting that bottle of water. Yeah, exactly like that.
Yeah, I used to practice. I don't practice anymore. You have to find out where it is. You can do it with an apple. The hard one is doing it with a ball like a tennis ball or a baseball. Those are hard to balance. But this little thing that I've got up there, that's easy.
It's actually very helpful. I mean, the moment you start slouching, the ball will remind you.
The ball will move, exactly. So this is a good exercise to practice. Can you sit there and talk or enjoy your life or sitting in meditation or whatever you're doing and maintain that position so that you don't slouch or slump, because if you do, you'll lose that little toy that you've got on your head. Another one they use would be a book, to balance a book on your head.
Oh, this is actually practiced by the monks.
Yeah, to practice, to know how much you're moving so that I can nod just a little bit and not lose that thing. But if I nod too much, it'll fall. And so you begin to test your limits and you start becoming mindful of what the body's doing. I haven't talked to students about this in a long time. I'm glad that it's come up. All right, to start practicing knowing what your posture is rather than practicing holding still,
Yeah.
because the holding still will give you pain. If you sit long enough in any particular posture holding still, you'll wind up in pain. If the knees are folded, then the circulation will be cut off at the knees, and the lower part of the legs will start to tingle.
It's also not possible because when you're doing deep breathing, then you're automatically gonna move so much that you can't really sit still.
Exactly. The Buddha didn't have. You remember that part of that passage, Kat, where you're saying, "Go to the forest, go to the under a tree, to an empty hut, to a pile of straw, and sit down on a sitting place, as opposed to sit down cross-legged, and bring mindfulness to the fore." Well, holding this thing on my head requires me to be mindful of what I'm doing with my head, because if I become unmindful, it'll fall. Now, that's
Oh,
got a problem. Only do that with a bottle that's got just about an inch or two of
yeah.
water in it, because that has to do with the center of gravity.
Yeah, you wanted just a little bit of water.
Never
That's
mind. Never mind. Start again.
Never mind. Start again. But you see, I can do quite a lot of movement with my head and not lose that thing, because I can move it back. It's kind of like a dynamic balance rather than holding it still. That in fact, has a lot to do with opeka. Okay, equanimity is not rigidly, solidly upright. That you can move a lot, but you have to find that dynamic balance so that you can hold your head erect without losing the object that you've got balanced on your head. As you can tell, I've been well practiced at this. I haven't even practiced it in several years. I used to enjoy doing it. I mean, I can go to town, can ride in a car, holding something on top of the head, because you're mindful of if it's losing its balance, if it's slipping a little bit, then you can. It's actually the same exact thing as a high wire act. You've seen these guys string a high wire between two high buildings, two skyscrapers, and he gets this balance pole, and he goes out there and walks on it. Other people will take the tires off a bicycle and put the rims and ride the bicycle on that high wire across. It's all a matter of balance. And if you can see that from the physical thing, then you can translate that to, can you live your life that way? Can you live your life in a dynamically balanced way, so that you don't fall and, and bust your butt? So this is what we have to say about language. And also, this would be, in a sense, going back to that point about living the Dhamma as opposed to talking about Dhamma. That Western Buddhism is a lot about talking about Dhamma rather than actually living Dhamma, or maybe practicing Dhamma only in the sense of the meditation. They expect to get something out of the meditation. To really, the only thing that you're ever going to get out of meditation is when you're doing it often enough. So if you're going to use something to balance your head with, yeah, the best place to do it is to start sitting in a meditation, like a formal meditation or whatever like that. But the real point is can you get up across the room and get yourself a cup of coffee, etc., like that, and still hold that thing without losing your balance? So the Dhamma is to be lived, not to be talked about. Go ahead, Kat.
Oh, well, in my head, I kind of had the thought it was just more about developing sati rather than literally like holding the bottle around wherever you go, you know. Like I
Yeah,
thought
well,
it was,
that takes mindfulness. That will develop sati as well as watching your breathing, because you can stop breathing and you stop watching your breath, going with a long breath in, the long breath out, and go back to normal breathing. You don't even notice.
yeah.
Oh, Jesus, good to see you.
Jesus. Amen.
Hello.
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 Oh,
So
I need.
I'm practicing mindfulness. You can tell by my top knot.
Oh my God, I cannot hear. I come back in a minute. I cannot hear nothing. Come back in a minute.
So, Daniel, going back to what we were talking about before, I think that you can kind of understand that it's not a matter of holding still the way that the Goenka or sometimes the Mahasi talk about it, but it's rather to develop mindfulness about the body, so that the breathing, you'll lose your mindfulness. But balancing something on the top of your head like this, that's actually practicing, so that you have to be able to talk like I'm talking now and still be mindful of that thing that's sitting on top of the head.
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes sense.
So do you guys have any other questions?
I it's hard for me to word this. Um, you know, one time you mentioned background thoughts are really not background, but they're in the foreground, but they have this sense of like subliminal experience,
They're
like they're there,
fast.
but
They come up
yeah,
right in front of you, and then they pass away so quickly that you may not even notice them well, and so we call it background noise.
yes,
All right. But even if it's background noise, let us say that it was thundering and lightning, or maybe motorbikes were passing by, we're out in traffic, the birds are singing, all of that kind of stuff is background noise. But when the birds are singing, you notice it. And when you notice it, they're in the foreground. And then you come back to the conversation and you're back to a new foreground. Notice that the mind wandered away and then it came back. That is always in the foreground. So those thoughts that you have, they may be very quick. We can call it in the background, but the reality is that they are in the foreground when we're watching it. So if a motorcycle goes by with a loud noise, we notice it and then come back to the conversation. So for the matter of the conversation, the motorcycle noise would be considered background because of our language. But
yeah.
the reality is that the motorcycle is only in the background when it's not seen, not heard. But
Okay,
if you do notice it, it's in the foreground.
I think I have what I'm trying to say a bit more clear is that you could be doing something, but you're not exactly sure about what, or there is the underlying reason about what you're doing. Like what you're doing is in the foreground, but actually there is there could be unwholesome intention or underlying things to what you're doing that are actually there. But since what you're doing is so gross and you're so into what you're doing, you don't see why exactly you're doing what you're doing, you know? I don't know if that makes sense. It's very hard for me to word this from the experience, like to describe the experience. It's hard to word it.
All right, let's talk about it in the sense of conscious, semi-conscious, and unconscious. So that car just went by. I heard it. It was in my conscious. I can also see somebody walking in the yard, they're getting laundry, and I know who it is. But I don't know how she's dressed. All I know is that she's in dark clothing because I haven't actually changed or diverted my eyes to actually pay attention to it. So all of that is in my subconscious. In other words, I'm not really paying attention to it, but I know that it's there. As opposed to unconscious means that things are happening all around us and we're so not open, we're so in our heads that we don't have a clue about what's happening. One of the trainings that Achan Po gave me, in fact, let me see if I can adjust my posture and still maintain this thing, and that he would sneak up on me. He did it dozens of times. He would watch to see how alert and aware I was, and if he could catch me off guard, he'd sneak up behind me, and he would be completely in my unconscious until he said something, often right in my ear, and bring it right to the fore so that I would become conscious of the fact that I had not been conscious of him being there. And he eventually stopped doing that to me when he could not catch me. Couldn't catch me out. So when he got within 10 feet of me, even sneaking up from behind, I'd know he was there. That's a skill to be developed, and I am so grateful to him to do the time that it took him. He didn't speak English very well, but he taught me the Dhamma in action. And I can't do that with you guys. I can't follow you around and trip you up and play games with you and whisper in your ear. I can't do that. That's part of the training that I got, and I can't do that with you. But the kind of training that we have together is the training that's only done verbally. And like I said, the Dhamma is not in the words. The Dhamma is in the action. That we have to wake people up. That's why Jesus or Jesu, the first part of this conversation was Bhikkhu Buddhadasa using low-class language to wake people up. That if you have ordinary language, they will hear what you say, but the meaning of it doesn't impact you. It's subconscious. But if he uses low-class language by like calling a dog a high honorific, I mean, I would say that in our language, we actually name a dog king. Well, I imagine 300 or 400 years ago, calling a dog king, that upset a lot of people. You're not supposed to call a dog king. All right? But here he is calling this dog Luang Po, and he upsets people about it because they don't like that he's putting the dog in such a high place. So
He
this
called
is
the dog Lampo.
Yeah, he called the dog Luang Po. And
Nice.
where you come from, I mean, you've been to Amravati, so you know that that word is a very high honorific.
Yes.
That only Achan Samedo, Achan Amaro, and Achan Pasano get the Luang Po. Nobody else. You can't call a dog Luang Po. Well, Bhikkhu Buddhadasa would call the dog Luang Po, and that got people's attention. And another way of getting attention was having Achan Po sneak up on me to get my attention. Also balancing things on the head so that we can pay attention to what we're doing. This is the Dhamma in action. In the sutras, it talks about grasping, reaching, touching, walking, whatever the body is doing, become mindful of it. An example of that would be, let us say, carrying something in the hand, like carrying a puppy. I saw Tam do this the other day, that she wanted to pick up 3 items and she already had the stuff. And I finally mentioned to her, why don't you put that down? You don't need it now, so you can pick up the other stuff. She wasn't being mindful of what her hands were doing. And so this is a way of training is, what are you doing with your hands? Are you trying to pick up too much? Then, in fact, that goes to the point of you've seen waiters that get on videos because this gal can carry, let us say, 30 pints of beer with handles. That takes training. That takes mindfulness. Anybody who can carry 30 mugs of beer across the restaurant floor and set them down and serve them beer, she's going to make a good Dhamma student.
Oh.
Because she's learned to watch what she's doing. You also see sometimes the French waiters, they'll come in with 8, 10, 12 plates of food, carrying it all up and down their arms. Have you seen that kind of thing? Yeah, doesn't that take training? Doesn't that take not just training to do it the first time, but it takes mindfulness to walk across the restaurant floor without dropping half that stuff. And yet most of the videos we see is people not being mindful, and they wind up dropping what they're carrying. I just saw a video just a while ago of the plate was sitting there. The chef was getting his stuff ready. He pulls out his ladle and he plops all of his food on the table because somebody had just taken that plate to clean it for him. And he wound up putting all the food on. He wasn't watching what he was doing. He assumed the plate was going to be there instead of looking. So this is the Dhamma for you, is watch what's going on so you don't wind up piling your food or anything else on the table that you've got the plate there. You also see people that when there's a loud noise, they'll drop whatever they're carrying, a bucket of water or a plate of food or something like that, and a loud sound, and they'll drop it because they're not mindful of what they're doing. So this is actually this thing that I've got here. This is a good training. As you noticed, I've been pretty good at it.
What is it?
Pardon?
You have something in your head or something?
Yeah, you don't just see the green and white thing on top of the head?
Yeah, it's something that this picture is very small. I cannot see it. Let me zoom in. Okay. Oh, okay. Oh, wow. All right. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna try that.
Okay, so this is training. That when I leaned in, you notice that I was doing it so that I kept my head straight up. Most people, when they'll lean in so that their head will nod and then it will fall. Thank you for giving me that examination. That was a test. Can I get up? Can I move 4 or 5 feet forward and still hold that thing on the head?
All right. Okay.
Daniel tried it with a water bottle of 10 minutes ago, and he couldn't keep it 5 seconds.
When
What was that, Jay?
Sorry. When I was a scuba diver, for 10 years. If I didn't breathe well, I would sink or go to the surface. So I have to be the whole dive, like breathing exactly the amount of air I needed in the lungs. I think that was a good training for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because yes, for example, if I put a lot of air out, I sink. So I have to be always like.
Right. So this is actually what we've been talking about all of this time is upekkha, dynamic balance. To be able to keep the balance, even when you're on a ship that the deck is rocking back and forth in a storm. Can you still walk down that deck? The old captain of the boat, he can do that, but some guests, they can't. They can't hold their balance. Okay, so this thing that I'm holding on my head, in fact, it's been years since I've even thought about that. Thank you for reminding me, Daniel. To learn to balance, to remember that you can keep your head up straight. This is what sati is all about. This is the development of sati, which means then that I can talk to you and remember my head, and I can lean forward and remember my head. I can breathe deeply and remember the head. All of that is in consciousness. Nothing goes into the background. If this little can goes into the background, it'll fall. I could just
doesn't get
imagine
like
everybody who watches this video is going to start practicing this.
I'm gonna do this at breakfast. See what the monks say.
What was that, Daniel?
I said I'm gonna practice this at breakfast and see what the monks say. Maybe crazy for wrong.
Yeah.
So I had a question that's actually a bit related to this, unless you want to talk more about Upeka.
Well, if you got another question,
But,
we can change the subject or we can finish the call. We've had quite a ball so far, but if you got another question, go ahead.
Yeah. It's actually one small question and another one. But I have an injury to my jaw from like a couple of years ago. Because of that, like it gets uncomfortable, like in my body, and then I feel like I have to move it, and it sort of like became a tick, like a physical tick for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I have noticed that like it comes and goes, and sometimes I cause myself like a lot of dukkha over it. So how would you handle this, like this bodily,
All right.
problem?
All right. So an old injury, here's how we can do that. Number one, recognize that it is there, and recognize number two that it doesn't run your life. All right. But you can pay attention to it and give it the nurturing that it needs. For instance, you can change your jaw, you can twist it up and down, or if that pains, then the better thing to do is to hold the jaw still. But whichever way that you're doing it, do it mindfully so as to reduce the amount of sensation. Give the jaw what it wants. Find out what the jaw wants and then give it to it. Be nurturing.
It becomes much worse. I feel like it becomes much worse when I just like give into it, and then it's like if I move it
Well,
like one
giving
time, then I
into it,
start doing
wait
it
a
more and
minute.
more and more.
Let's stop for just a second. The word giving into it is a Western word that has a negative connotation. A much better language to use is give it the nurturing that it needs rather than giving into it. All right. Giving into it is a negative connotation, and often what that means is that you're actually going to, especially in the long run, give more pain by giving into it. Like giving into a child who is mistreating other people, putting his foot on grandpa's leg or whatever like that, making him dirty, and the mother doesn't do anything about it. I just saw this as a video. In fact, that this was happening on a train or a subway or something. And then the guy who was sitting across from her, he comes over and starts putting the wrapping of his food and paper and starts putting it on her. And when she gets indignant, he tells her, "Oh, well, when I was a child, my mother didn't discipline me." And that really upset her because he had caught her out that she wasn't disciplining her son when he needed to be disciplined. So this is the point about yourself. Discipline yourself, but do it with kindness. So sitting in a good place and being mindful of the small movements that you're making would be considered nurturing. But holding the body rigidly still, that's would be going too far. We always want to find a dynamic balance, a middle path. Everything requires a middle path. One extreme or another with your jaw and everything else is going to be dukkha. So find out what the jaw needs and be very, very nurturing rather than thinking of giving in like you've lost and the jaw is won. I fought the jaw and the jaw won. Is that what giving in means?
Yeah.
No,
It does
don't
feel
fight
a
with the
bit like
jaw.
that sometimes.
Mhm. So don't fight with it, but rather nurturing it, and allow the sensation to not be much of a bother. An example is I've been sitting here doing programming and talking to Kat, and I've just been sitting here, and the butt pain has come back, and I have to be nurturing to the pain, but it's not going to stop me. It's not going to put me off. I'm not going to tell you, oh, I'm not going to sit here. I'm going to leave so that I can get up and relax the pain. No, I'm not nurturing it very much, but I will. But right now, I'm just putting up with it. I'm not giving into it. But I'm treating it mindfully. So mindfully watching the butt pain, mindfully sitting up straight, mindfully holding the little can on my head, while mindfully giving a Dhamma talk. And nothing is in the background. Anything goes into the background, I'll lose it.
It's almost like juggling. I think someone who can juggle.
It's juggling, precisely. Yes. Except that we're juggling with the mind. We're dynamically balancing 4, 5, 6 bowling pins or whatever they're juggling. Learn to juggle so that you don't drop your shit.
That would be a good way to time structure, actually, just to do some juggling,
Mm-hmm.
I guess.
Yes, learn to pay attention to the body, because it's going to be the body that's doing that juggling. This is why the body is so important within the context of Anapanasati. It's one of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Can you pay attention to what the body is doing while you're also talking? This is the Dhamma in action. The Dhamma is not to be talked about. That's the same as the Tao Te Ching. The opening line of the Tao Te Ching is the Tao that can be said is not the Tao. The Dhamma that can be said is not the Dhamma. The Dhamma is action. Dhamma is real, and we have a duty to the Dhamma. One of the duties that I'm fulfilling right now is holding this little can on my head. So did that answer your question about your jaw?
Yes, thank you very much.
All right. Kat, do you have any last things to say?
No. Except Merry Christmas, I guess.
Merry
Christmas.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Jesus, do you have anything?
I mistake the time, so I came late, but it seems like it was very interesting. I'm gonna watch it later. Just thank you very much.
I'm very
glad
that you joined us. And Rick's not here now. He left. I think that he was having communication problems. He's in India. So thank you all for coming. One last thing I want to do, and that is take this thing off.
Okay.
See
you
you.
very much.
All right. See you later.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. This has been a fun talk. I've enjoyed this.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you so much.